My name is Tessa Quinn, and I swore I would never touch a horse again. Not after what happened that summer in Montana. Not after the trial. Not after I lost everything. My career, my friends, my trust in the world. One moment I was a rising star in the world of show jumping. The next, I was the girl who froze at the last jump. The headlines were cruel. The silence from my teammates, worse. They said it wasn't my fault, that the horse misstepped, that no rider could have saved him. But they didn't see what I saw. The moment before the fall, I hesitated. I saw it, felt it in my bones, and I didn't pull back, didn't call for a circle. I pushed forward. And the horse, Valor, went down hard. He didn't get up. They told me to move on. But how do you move on when you can still hear the snap of bone in your dreams? So I quit, sold everything, packed up my life and moved to a remote town in Washington State, to a weathered little farmhouse that smelled like pine needles and old hay. I told everyone I needed quiet. What I really needed was to disappear. And for almost a year, I did, until he showed up. It started with a knock on my cabin door. Bethany, the neighbor I barely knew who ran a small rescue down the road, stood there holding a clipboard and an apologetic smile. "Sorry to bother you," she said. "But I need a favor." My gut twisted. I don't do horses anymore. I know, but this one's different. Aren't they all? Bethany glanced back at the dusty pickup behind her. Inside was a trailer. And inside the trailer, I didn't have to see it to know, was the horse she was talking about. "He's not dangerous," she said quickly. "But he doesn't listen. To anyone. Won't load. Won't lunge. Won't stand tied. So, why bring him to me? Because he follows people who don't ask anything of him." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She smiled a little. "I heard about Valor. I know what happened, and I also know you don't force. You feel. That's rare." I almost slammed the door right there. Instead, I said, "You have 10 minutes. His name was Cato. 6 years old. Mustang blood. Massive. Black with a white blaze that ran sharp and jagged down his face like a scar. Eyes like wildfire. When I first saw him step out of the trailer, no lead, just wandering out like it was his choice, I couldn't breathe. He didn't spook, didn't snort. He just looked at me, not through me, at me, like he recognized something. "Where'd I—" "You get him?" I asked. "Border roundup. Owner didn't want him. Said he was too much work." I crossed my arms. "So, you thought of me." "I thought he deserved someone who wouldn't try to fix him. I should have said no. I should have turned away, closed the door, gone back to hiding. But instead, I nodded. Leave him here." The first few days, I barely went near him. Cato stayed in the back pasture, grazing, watching. Never approached the fence. Never came when called. But he didn't leave either. And that unsettled me. I was used to fight or flight. The rearing, the bolting, the explosive power of a horse trying to save itself. But Cato, he waited. Not submissive, not hostile, just present. He wouldn't let me touch him. But he never ran. And somehow, that was worse. Because it meant he was choosing me. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. And I didn't know what to do with that. On the 4th day, I brought out a feed bucket and sat with my back against the fence post. I didn't call him, didn't look at him. Just listened to the wind in the trees and tried not to think. Hoofbeats broke the silence. I turned my head slightly. Cato stood a few feet away watching me. I didn't move, didn't speak. He stepped closer, sniffed the bucket, then my boots, Then, the ground. I stayed still, heart pounding. He bumped my knee once, light, curious, then turned and walked away. It was the first time I'd been touched by a horse in nearly a year, and I felt like I might collapse. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept seeing his eyes in the dark. Not wild, not scared, just sure. Like he knew I wouldn't push him, like he trusted me. And that terrified me more than anything. Because I wasn't ready to be trusted again. Not after what happened last time. But Cato didn't care about my history. He didn't care about my past. He only cared about what I chose to do next, and whether I said yes or said stop. I didn't ask for him to follow me. My name is Tessa Quinn, and I used to be the kind of woman who made horses move with a thought. I'd raise my hand, and they'd step back, shift my weight, and they'd slide into canter like silk. I understood them. I belonged with them. But then everything fell apart. Not just the riding. Me. After Valor died, I didn't just walk away from the arena. I walked away from myself. The girl with the trophies, the reputation, the precision. She shattered on the ground beside him. The horse world moved on, but I stayed broken. And then Cato came. I didn't ask for him. I didn't want him. But from the first moment his eyes met mine, sharp, unreadable, awake, something deep in me began to shift. Slowly, uneasily, like a piece of armor loosening from the inside out. And now he wouldn't leave me alone. It started the morning after he touched my knee. I was walking the fence line with my thermos in hand, hair tied back, still shaking off a dream I didn't want to remember. Me riding, Valor beneath me, and then silence. No jump, no ground, just loss. Cato watched me from the far end of the pasture. I could feel his gaze before I turned. I didn't wave, didn't speak, just kept walking. Halfway down the hill, I stopped to fix a sagging strand of wire. I knelt, hands in the dirt, brain far away. And then, breath. Warm. A close. I froze. Turned slowly. Cato stood behind me, less than a meter away. No halter. No call. He had followed me. My pulse jumped. "You're not supposed to be this close," I whispered. He flicked his ears, but didn't back off. I stood. Slowly. He didn't retreat. "Okay," I murmured. "That's enough." I took a step backward. He took a step forward. I frowned. "Cato. Stop." He blinked, but didn't stop. Another step. Now I could feel his presence like pressure. His body wasn't touching mine, but it filled the space between us. I stepped sideways. He mirrored me. "Cato." I tried again, this time more firm. I said stop. He lowered his head. Not submissive, just steady. And then nudged me, hard enough to push me off balance. I caught myself before I fell. The air snapped inside me. "Don't do that." He stepped back. Still calm, still watching. And that's when I realized he wasn't testing boundaries. He was ignoring them. I spent the rest of the day avoiding the pasture. I told myself I had other things to do. Fix the gate, oil the tack, sweep the barn aisle again, even though it was already clean. But really, I was just shaken. I hadn't felt that kind of intensity since the days before the accident, when horses responded to me like we were wired, to the same current. It should have felt good. It felt dangerous. Because this wasn't just a horse choosing to be near me. It was a horse who wouldn't let me walk away. That night, I called Bethany. Is there any chance this horse was trained? Before? I asked. She paused. No formal training. Why? He doesn't act feral. He acts like someone gave him permission once, and he never gave it back. Bethany laughed softly. Yeah, that sounds like him. I told him to stop, and he didn't. Did he attack you? No, he just didn't listen. Beth's voice turned thoughtful. Maybe he didn't hear a no. Maybe he heard a question. I said nothing, because I didn't like what that stirred in me. The next morning, I returned to the pasture, determined, guarded. Cato was already waiting by the fence. I entered with slow steps, keeping my shoulders square and my voice neutral. Just checking the troughs, that's all. He followed again, quiet, unapologetic. I picked up the pace. He matched it. I stopped. He stopped. I turned sharply. He stepped to the side, not behind me, beside me, too close. I raised my hand. Back. He didn't move. Cato, I said back. Nothing. So, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I stepped into him. Not hard, just enough to demand space. And for the first time, he did step back. 3 paces. Then stood still. I exhaled. Good. I whispered. He tilted his head. And then, as if making a point, he sat down right there in the dirt, legs tucked, like a dog. I stared at him. You're not like other horses, are you? He huffed. I sat down too, several feet away, unsure of who had actually won the standoff. And we just sat, side by side. No commands. No retreat. Just presence. Didn't say stop again, and he didn't push again, because we had both said enough. And for now, that was peace. I tried to push him away. But he stayed. Somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be alone. Not physically. I'd mastered that part. For nearly a year, I'd eaten dinner by myself, woken up to silence, and filled my days with tasks no one else ever saw. But alone with someone? Alone while being watched? That was different. And Cato had a way of watching me that made my bones. He didn't leer, didn't stalk. He studied. Like he was learning my movements, my moods, the invisible changes in air pressure when I was about to cry or flinch or shut down. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that he followed me, out of habit, that he stood beside me because I was the one who fed him. But deep down, I knew better. Cato wasn't looking for food. He was looking for me. And I didn't know what to do with that. So I tried to push him away. Gently. Firmly. Every day. And every day, he stayed. It started with small things. I stopped bringing him treats. No apples, no carrots, no click or coo of my voice. When I walked the pasture, I kept my back turned and my steps quick. I ignored him when he followed. I avoided eye contact. Told myself it was for his benefit, to reestablish space, boundaries, balance. But really? I was scared, because Cato was seeing a version of me I'd buried. The one who used to speak in body language and hear emotions in the tension of a horse's jaw. The version of me who had trusted too much and lost everything. I didn't want to go back to her, so I pretended I was made of stone. On the 6th day of this game, he stopped following. I should have been relieved. Instead, I panicked. I walked the fence line, rechecked the troughs, sat on the barn steps and waited. He stayed under the far oak tree, facing away from me. Still, quiet. I waited an hour. He never looked back, and it broke something in me. I stood up, crossed the pasture. Every step felt like thunder in my chest. When I reached him, I stopped. My hands shook. "Cato," I said quietly. "I'm sorry." He didn't move, didn't even flick his tail. I swallowed the lump in my throat and stepped closer. "No more games," I whispered. "You don't deserve that." His ear turned toward me. I exhaled. And then, slowly, he turned, looked at me, and stepped forward. Once, twice, until we stood nose to nose, and he rested his forehead against mine. My knees nearly buckled. Because there it was, the connection I had tried so hard to kill, still alive, still wanting me. Even after I pushed him away. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd done. It wasn't affection. Not exactly. It was presence. A kind of loyalty no one had offered me since the fall. People had walked away. They distanced themselves, said the right words, then ghosted when the spotlight faded. I was a reminder of tragedy, of failure, of something they didn't want to feel. But Cato, he stayed, even when I gave him no reward, even when I offered no invitation, even when I asked him, silently and out loud, to go. He stayed, not because he didn't understand boundaries, because he saw through them. The next morning, I brought a halter to the pasture, not to use, just to hold. Cato lifted his head as I approached, curious but not cautious. I stopped a few feet from him and held the halter up. "No pressure," I said. "Just wondering if we're ready." He stepped forward, sniffed the leather, then nudged it. I laughed. "Okay. You want the next step?" He stood still as I slipped the halter over his head. No flinch, no fight. My hands trembled as I buckled the strap beneath his chin. It was the first piece of tack I'd touched in 11 months, and it didn't feel like control. It felt like permission. His, not mine. We walked. Slow circles in the pasture. Rope, slack in my hand. No commands. Just movement. Just rhythm. He followed me like he'd always belonged beside me, and maybe he had. Maybe he was what I needed all along, not to be in charge, not to prove anything, but to be chosen, without question, without expectation. When we stopped, I faced him. "Why do you stay?" I asked. He blinked, lowered his head, and pressed his nose against my chest. Not a push, not a demand, just a heartbeat, meeting mine. And I knew. He stayed, because I did. He took control, and I let him. The storm came out of nowhere. 1 minute, the sky was pale blue and cloudless. The next, wind tore through the trees like something alive. The temperature dropped, and the air thickened with the scent of lightning. I'd always hated storms. Even before the accident, thunder unsettled me. It felt too close, too loud, like the world was cracking at its seams and no one was paying attention. After Valor, I couldn't hear thunder without flinching. That day, the wind hit around 4 p.m. I was halfway through brushing Cato's coat when the first gust slammed the side of the barn. He jerked slightly but didn't bolt. I froze, my hand still tangled, in his mane. "You okay?" I whispered. He didn't answer, obviously, but he turned his head toward me, calm and alert. The wind howled again, this time stronger. Cato's muscles tensed. A low rumble of thunder rolled over the hills. "Let's get inside," I said quickly. I reached for his halter, but he didn't move. Instead, he stepped forward. Not in panic. With purpose. Like he'd decided something. "Cato, come on," I urged, tugging lightly at the rope. He refused, planted himself like a mountain. The wind slammed again. And I saw the shift in his eyes. Not fear, not confusion, conviction. And then he turned, and walked. Not toward the barn, toward the field, away from safety. I hesitated for only a second. Then I dropped the rope and followed him. I don't know what made me do it. Instinct, maybe, or something deeper. Something unspoken between us. A bond I hadn't admitted to yet. But whatever it was, I didn't stop to think. I just followed. Cato moved through the wind like it was nothing. Ears alert, tail high, hooves sure over the uneven ground. I kept pace behind him, shielding my eyes from the dust. "Where are you going?" I called. No answer, of course. But he didn't stop. I stumbled once over a root, regained my footing. The thunder grew louder. Then came the rain. Sudden, sharp, freezing. It soaked us in seconds. Still, he didn't turn around. Still, I followed, because I had to know. He led me to the farthest part of the pasture, near the ridge where the fence had partially collapsed weeks ago, where trees bent low and wild under the wind. I expected him to bolt, to run into the trees, to disappear. Instead, he stopped. Dead still. He turned back to me and waited, chest heaving, rain pouring off his coat, eyes locked on mine. It hit me then. He wasn't running. He was choosing to lead, choosing to bring me here, and he was waiting to see if I would follow all the way. I stepped beside him, breath heavy, soaked to the skin, and for the first time since Valor, I let go of the reins inside me. "Okay," I whispered. "Take the lead." He exhaled, then stepped closer, pressed his body lightly against mine. Not forceful, not pinning, but firm, solid, and I understood. I'd been trying to stay in control this whole time, of my feelings, of my space, of him. But Cato wasn't asking to take control in the way people meant it. He was asking me to let go, to trust him, to follow his rhythm, not mine. And in that moment, soaked in rain, heartbeat thundering louder than the sky, I did. I let him lean into me, let him choose for us both, and it didn't feel scary. It felt like safety. We stayed like that until the storm passed. Minutes, maybe longer. I lost all sense of time. I rested my hand on his side and felt the rise and fall of his breath. Strong, steady, unshaken. Closed my eyes and whispered, "I've never done this before." He shifted, just enough for me to feel it, and then stilled again. I don't know if he understood, but I knew he saw me. Not as a trainer, not as a rider, just me, and that was enough. When we finally returned to the barn, Bethany was waiting. Her truck lights lit up the gravel. She looked soaked too, wrapped in a poncho and clutching a flashlight. "Are you out of your mind?" she called. "You could have been hurt." "I know," I said softly. She looked past me, at Cato, who was walking beside me, loose lead, calm as a cloud. "What happened out there?" she asked. I turned to him. He took control. Beth frowned. "And you let him?" I smiled. "Yes. And I've never felt safer." She didn't answer. But the look in her eyes said everything, because sometimes surrender isn't weakness. Sometimes it's freedom. I said stop, but he wouldn't listen. I thought I was ready to move forward. After the storm, after Cato led me through it, I felt something shift inside me. Like a door I'd kept bolted finally creaked open. I let him in. I let myself breathe again. I even told Bethany, in a voice I barely recognized as mine, "I think I'm healing." But healing isn't a straight line. And some things, no matter how deeply buried, have a way of clawing back to the surface when you least expect them. The invitation came by mail. A heavy, cream-colored envelope tucked in my box, with a name I hadn't heard in months stamped across the top. Northwest Equestrian Trials, invitational demo event. They wanted me to ride, not compete. Just a short exhibition. Symbolic forgiveness, perhaps. Or curiosity. Show them you're still here, the letter read. I stared at the paper for a long time. I hadn't been on a horse since Valor. Hadn't wanted to. But now, with Cato, the thought wasn't panic. It was ache. The kind of ache that whispered, maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time you won't fall. I didn't make a decision right away. I walked the pastures, sat on the barn step, ran my fingers through Cato's mane and told him everything I couldn't say, out loud. I'm not afraid of you, I whispered. I'm afraid of what I become. Up there. Cato stood beside me, motionless. And then, as if answering me, he stepped behind me and nudged my back. Gently. Then again and again. Pushing. Insistent. I laughed, startled. Stop it, I said. He did not. He pushed harder. Not enough to hurt. Just enough to say, "Go," I said, "stop." He didn't. Instead, he pressed his head into my shoulder and held it there. And I understood. He wasn't pushing me away. He was pushing me forward. Because he knew. Even when I said stop, what I really meant was, I don't think I'm ready. And he wouldn't accept that. Because maybe I was. The morning of the event, I didn't eat. Didn't sleep much either. Bethany helped me braid Cato's mane. I brushed his coat until it gleamed. He stood calmly, eyes soft, as if he knew this wasn't just for show. This was for us. He loaded into the trailer with only a glance back at me. One step, then two. No resistance, no rope, just trust. The arena was bigger than I remembered. Empty stands, a few early spectators, the distant smell of leather and dust and tension. I stepped into the holding area and felt the familiar shake return to my knees. Not fear of the horse, fear of the memory. Touched the ring gate, closed my eyes. Cato stood behind me, waiting. I opened the gate and walked in. There was no pattern, no jumps, no scorecard, just an open circle of sand and silence. I led Cato to the center and unhooked the rope. He stayed. Stepped back. He stayed. I walked a slow arc around him, hands open, and he moved with me, not behind me, beside me. We danced, not with reins or commands, with breath, with presence, with shared understanding. I turned. He turned. I stopped. He stopped. And then, with no signal, no cue, he laid down, right there, in the center of the arena, pressed his body into the earth like a banner that said, I am here, and I choose her. I dropped to my knees beside him, tears slipping down my cheeks. And the audience? They didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They stood, silent, still, witnessing something deeper than performance. They saw trust. They saw healing. They saw what happens when you say stop, and someone listens, just long enough to know you don't mean it. I rode him for the first time that afternoon. Not in the ring. In the pasture, just the two of us. Bareback. No bridle, no saddle. Just sunlight and wind and quiet, and him beneath me. Steady, alive, powerful, and mine. Not because I controlled him, but because I never tried to.